Until now, when European gourmet cheeses have been exported to the growing market in Japan, a 30% trade tariff has been imposed. But with the EU and Japan free trade agreement now signed, those duties will be cut. For the EU, this deal is about making a point.
Although some are saying that the time of isolationism and disintegration is coming again, we are demonstrating that this is not the case.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is calling it a win-win agreement.
Japan and the EU account for 30% of the GDP, 10% of the world's population and 40% of its trade. So this is the birth of the world's largest free, advanced, industrialized economic zone.
But opponents say the deal will be bad for the environment and won't curb illegal trade or overfishing, and that it will hand power to corporates over small businesses. Japan says that this trade deal is as important as the Asia Trade Pact with the United States, known as TPP, which fell apart when Donald Trump took over the US presidency. For the EU, it's using the agreement to show that it can press on with signing trade deals without the United Kingdom after the Brexit vote. One of the sticking points in the deal was how fast the 10% duty in Europe on Japanese cars would be phased out. They compromised on 7 years. And it all happened ahead of a meeting of G20 leaders in Germany.
It's not by accident that this deal is being agreed upon just before the G20 meeting. So both the EU and Japan will be able to go at the G20 meeting in Hamburg and tell not only America but tell the world, that we are pursuing still an agenda of trade liberalization.
Across the board, it's thought the total saving for exporters of things like cheese, wine and cars will be more than $1 billion. But the deal still needs to be signed off by national and regional parliaments in Europe and Japan before it can go into force. Jack Parrock, TRT World, Brussels.
And Jack joins us live now from Brussels. Jack, I just want to ask you about the cheese and wine aspect of this story, which a lot of people will be interested in. They're completely scrapping the tariffs when the Japanese are buying them. So the producers in Italy, France, Spain and so on must be delighted.
They must be indeed. Now, it will take some time before they can really increase their exports to Japan, but there's a large market for that sort of luxury gourmet food product in Japan. Now, we expect that the EU's exports to Japan will go up by about 34% over a period of years to Japan, and that Japan will see their exports into the European Union go up by 29%. This deal is no small thing, and it's hoped to really boost trade on both sides. The issues of things like cars and cheese and wine are of interest because they're things that we can tangibly see, and European cheese and wine producers will be delighted about this deal, we expect.
Jack, whenever a free trade deal like this occurs, there are always people on the sidelines complaining about something, and in this case, the environment is an issue. Why is that?
Well, that was because, as part of the deal, as part of the negotiations, the two sides refused to involve any sort of discussions on whaling or logging or anything like that. And the Green Lobby always hopes that these trade deals can be used to push that sort of agenda, to reduce the amount of deforestation and whaling and overfishing issues. That wasn't involved. The Japanese and the Europeans on different issues refused to have that involved. And Greenpeace, who have been the biggest critic of the deal so far, have said that this basically transfers power from the people up to big corporations.
Another complaint you mentioned in your report was that the big companies, the big corporations, are going to do well out of this, and that the smaller ones might be overlooked.
Indeed. Well, the complaint about that is that essentially with import-export market, the big players have much more power to push their products, much more access into the other markets. And what that means is that the local domestic producers in a country might not be able to compete against cheaper exports coming in. This is a regular complaint, but we heard from Cecilia Malmström, the EU Trade Commissioner, say that any deal that would be done would have this sort of complaint put to it. But I have to say that generally this deal is being very well received here in Europe, and it's expected to be very well received in Japan also.
Just one fly in the ointment though, Jack. Europeans are quite famous for their cars. Renault, BMW, Volkswagen and so on. And they will now have to start competing with really good Japanese cars coming in with no tariffs in a few years' time. Did they kick up a stink?
They clearly were concerned about that issue, but it's important to note that as part of this deal, there is a mechanism for reimposing restrictions on Japanese cars, the wording being that if there's a larger increase than normal is to be expected on Japanese cars flooding the European market. So the Europeans have still put on a little bit of a hold on that. Important to note, though, that Japanese cars have had nowhere near the slice of the market in Europe that they have in other markets in Asia, in the US, etc. So it was sort of to be expected that any free trade deal would have to give Japan more access into the car industry market in the European Union.
Well, Jack Parrock in Brussels, thank you very much for the update. Appreciate it.